discussing Smoke and Ashes, a book by Amitav Ghosh. It's a book about the history of the opium trade from the perspective of India. So the writer is from India, and he has a history of writing about his region and a lot of the things that were happening around the opium trade, or in general around let's say indentured workers being shipped around the Indian Ocean to work on plantations. So it's this particular book is definitely sort of a post-colonial condemnation of the British Empire and all the people that have been profiteering from the opium trade. Now, I started the book actually pretty enthusiastically because I was very interested in seeing history as told from the perspective of a person that has deep roots in the Indian subcontinent, a place that I have very little knowledge culturally, intellectually. I barely know anybody. I have one friend that I grew up with in Switzerland who is Indian, half Indian, but we didn't really get into many of the cultural nuances of India. Now I live in Silicon Valley, so I'm exposed to Indian culture a lot more. But of course, that's also a very small sliver of Indian culture, which is the elite of Silicon Valley. That is, certainly, there's a lot of Indian culture, but those are. I wouldn't think that those are, representatives of the whole subcontinent of India. In other words, I am not familiar with this culture, so I was very enthusiastic to start reading about this story, but unfortunately the book really transformed into a sort of post-colonial list of complaints and excuses, and quite frankly racism as against, of course, against white people, but in general against people that have been subjugating or taking advantage of subjugation of other people. So whether it's the Parsi in India, whether it's the Armenians, whether it's white people, Americans, there is. And the reason I discuss this book because I've been pretty disappointed about the book. Again, it's a lot of racism and a lot of just stirring up old feelings and accusations and complaints and whinings and very one-sided view of the world. For example, the British Empire has certainly taken advantage of the opium trade, and nobody is condoling that in any way. However, there's been also lots of good things that came out of the British Empire. For example, the fact that the Indian subcontinent today is English speaking, and a lot of Indian families are successfully emigrating to the United States and succeeding there at the highest level in academics, certainly has a lot to do with the implementation of the British school system in India and things like that. So all of that, of course, is not being mentioned, but the fact that white people were selling drugs to Chinese people and have been exploiting Indian people while doing that, is being reiterated time and time again. I think the book is just not very nuanced. It's very one-sided and therefore disappointing. But I still want to discuss it because I think it's important to raise these topics. It's important to take stands against books like this. And in my opinion, books like this are important, but then the execution in this particular case is just not very successful. And on top of that, this Amitav Ghosh, I mean, he lives in Brooklyn, New York. He's he's taking advantage of the full opportunity set that free white built America offers him, but then all he can do is yell and scream and condemn everything that let's say white Americans have created in this country. And to me that is hypocrisy, and that is something that is prevalent in this cultural revolution that we're going through, that we have been going through in the last probably 2 decades, but certainly accelerated after COVID. It is okay for formerly subjugated people to stand up and ask for justice. It's even okay to ask for repatriation, for reparation in terms of money and things like that. All of these things are okay. But what's not okay is to bash everything and condemn the system that has enabled you to even have a voice. That to me is self-defeating, and it's the wrong approach towards a better future. This is an Avni Wrong podcast. It's September 22nd, 2024. This is Krimdelko. It's a Sunday. There's an update for the year. We're up 14.8%. The market is up 19.4%. We're underperforming by 4.6%. So the book Smoke and Ashes by Amitav Ghosh, it's a story of the opium trade in China that was conducted by the British Empire, and it's a story also from the lens of India, so from the perspective of the Indian subcontinent. So like I said in the prelude, I was very excited about reading this book because I think it's very important to read history from a different perspective, not just from the perspective, let's say, of British, Anglo-Saxon, English-speaking culture, but also from the culture, let's say, of the Indian subcontinent. And I think there's a lot of interesting things from this perspective to be read. I think it would be very interesting to read, in general, stories about colonialism as perceived from the people that were subjugated by the colonialists. And that's something that I lack, having grown up in Switzerland and being educated in the Swiss French system, and also later on in graduate school by the University of Chicago Anglo-Saxon system. So I haven't had exposure to this side of the world, and I think it's very important to have this type of exposure. So I think that's the good thing, and I think Amitav does a good job in sort of showing the history. Where I think he fails, in my opinion, is that he's taking a sort of political judgment, for lack of a better word. I think he has this wokist agenda of condemning everything that has been done and sort of throwing the baby out with the bathwater, in a sense that whether there, in my opinion, there's no debate about whether the British Empire and the colonialist attitudes were good or bad. They were certainly not good. However, that was also the time, and it was it was either them or somebody else would have done it, kind of thing. And most importantly, also when you are embedded in the history of your time, then you have to also accept that certain things were done in those times. And I think the biggest achievement of, let's say, the Anglo-Saxon world has been that we have had the Enlightenment and the subsequent proliferation of liberty and wealth creation for many parts of the world, not just the Anglo-Saxon part of the world. In particular, the Indian subcontinent has taken a tremendous advantage of the sort of liberty and scientific revolution that have been proliferated from the roots of the British Empire. So I think Amitav is completely neglectant of those types of things, and he's using a sort of inverse racist agenda, which is he is taking sort of the voice of the formerly subjugated people, and he's attempting to subjugate the people that have been the subjugators. And I think that is a big mistake that is happening in today's culture wars, that we wanna you know, right the wrongs by subjugating the wrongs, and therefore doing what was wrong and just you know, basically throwing the wrong to other people, and that, in my opinion, is not the right approach, because that will create tensions, that will create all kinds of culture wars, if not actually real wars. And that's just not the kind of agenda that I would subscribe to. So in this book, a couple of things come up that I think are important to discuss. I mean, for example, Amitav Ghosh compares the British Empire with, I don't know, El Chapo, or the, you know, the, I don't know, that family, the Purdue Pharma family, that and that, in my opinion, is not right, because, you know, El Chapo and the Mexican drug cartels, they're just criminal cartels. The British Empire wasn't exactly a criminal cartel. The British Empire was, you know, a legitimate you know, organization that was part of the global context in those days. And the global context in the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries was conquest. It was conquest of you know, local tribes within Africa or India or Persia, and it was conquest at the global level between the European nations, and then a bit later on between Asian nations and European nations, which then culminated in World War I and then World War II. So you know, those are contexts that, in my opinion, are much deeper, much more complex than something like an El Chapo or a Pablo Escobar, or even that family, the Purdue Pharma family. Those are small, petty crooks compared to the big sort of nation empires that were ruling the world in those days. And we could even extrapolate till today and say, look, what's the empire today? There's two big empires today. One's the American and the other's the Chinese. And then we have the Russians, which are kind of under the radar right now. But there's a lot of wrongs that happen at this level. And I think we can never have, you know, an empire or a large societal organization, whether you want to call it an empire or whatever you want to call it, you'll never have something like that is perfect and totally clean. There will always be corruption and hideous, you know, acts against human nature, and all of that stuff will happen. But I think what we also have to admit is that there is sort of the economic concept of the least worst scenario. In other words, we can have an empire, we can have ruling classes, we can have corruption, but we can also have a little bit better than somewhere else. And we can also have a little bit improving. And we can also have a couple of measurements maybe that help us understand that this system is better than that system. And I think, look, viewed from this context, I would take the Anglo-Saxon world, that's sort of from the 1700s onwards, as having been a little bit better than the other ones. And that's just simply measured in things like opportunity, in things like wealth creation. If you don't like these KPIs, then how about the famous KPI that there is a 2,000-man line in front of the American embassy and 0 people are standing in front of the Chinese, Indian, or Pakistani, or North Korean, or etc. embassy. I mean, at least not foreigners. And the reason is because nobody wants to go to these countries. Nobody wants to try, is desperate to go live there. Everybody is desperate to come live here, and also a little bit in Europe, although that's changing right now. And why is that? Because those countries have created a platform of liberty and a platform of opportunity that everybody wants to take part with. And I think everybody should be able to take part with. And it is our job here in the United States, as, let's say, the ruling classes of the United States, whoever they are, to create a better world for our kids and attempt to also create a better world for everybody else, to the extent that we can. Of course, we can't just have millions of illegal immigrants coming to the United States. That's not how it works. And the reason that that's not how it works is just that's the tragedy of the commons concept, right? If we want to protect this place so everybody can take advantage of it, then first and foremost we have to protect it. And then we can have immigration, we can share our wealth, we can also help people in their original countries so they don't even have to come here. We can do all of these things, and I think we should. And not because it's some sort of ethical imperative. It's just better for everybody to have a little bit more of the pie to share for everybody. So, having said that, now let me criticize some of the fundamental criticisms that I have with the book. Again, it's the inverse racism that is permeating through the book. So it's like the white man selling drugs to China, exploiting Indian people. That is, that is first and foremost, that is not the whole story. Okay, the opium trade or drug trade and exploitation of poor people has been going on in those parts of the world ever since those parts of the world have existed. Now, the fact that the British Empire took advantage of this and that the British Empire imposed themselves as colonial powers, that's certainly part of the story, and I am not condoling it by any means. I myself have no roots in any of this. I'm not, I grew up in Switzerland. My ancestry is from Croatia and Bosnia. We have, none of my family has ever been in any kind of way taking advantage of colonialism. Actually, we were subjugated by Ottomans and Austrians and Serbs and whatnot. So we certainly, I don't have any axe to grind here against somebody like Amitav Ghosh. Actually, I'm on his side when it comes to having been subjugated. However, I have also taken advantage of the Western Anglo-Saxon Enlightenment-inspired freedom and opportunity set that has been offered to my family, in particular my father and also myself. And therefore, I am very grateful for that, and I am incredibly protective of that. Because, again, I have seen how other places work. My parents, they came from Yugoslavia and emigrated to Switzerland. My wife emigrated from Lebanon. So I've seen places that don't work. I've seen places that screw around with liberty and subjugate liberty for some sort of better good, which is usually we are better than the others and the others are bad and we are good and things like that. So this otherism that Amitav Ghosh is permeating in his book, that's what I'm primarily criticizing here. I think it's not going anywhere if we start pointing fingers and you are bad and I am not, I was exploited by you and all those things. On top of that, not to mention the hypocrisy that is permeating also with people like Amitav Ghosh, which is he sits in Brooklyn, sends his kid to Wesleyan College, but spends pages and pages complaining about how all these northeastern colleges were basically founded by opium trade money, and how all this hypocrisy also that maybe roots in the Christian faith, and how all of this is sort of somehow not good and should be condemned and whatnot, and then he's taking full advantage of it. I just feel like that is my main criticism. That is where the buck stops with me. I don't like this because, again, I don't see any hope in this. I don't see any, what's the optimism? Look, if you have a problem, if you have been subjugated by the British Empire, let's say, then go ask for a number. It's okay. Go ask. Say, I want X amount of money. Just make it good. But stop complaining and stop trying to instigate hate between people. I think it is our job as adults to try to have our kids love each other, love their siblings, and if we can also the neighbors love each other, or at least not hate each other, and then maybe even the citizens not hate each other. And the reason it's our job is because that's how we can build sustainable societies that can have a better future for our kids. And I think that is the fundamental, necessity of everybody. I mean, why else are we doing this? What's the purpose of all this? So therefore, I think a book like this, again, the idea is great. I think it's phenomenal to have the perspective of somebody else, but I think the execution, in my opinion, of Amitav Ghosh's Smoke and Ashes lacks the subtlety and the intellectual fervor that is necessary to discuss this in a positive and more optimistic way. Thank you.